East Coast Pokemon. Today, Aaron, Rosemary, and I are going to be going over a preview of the North American International Championship, the final event leading toward the World Championship, and it is going to be the biggest international championship to date with over 1,000 players potentially registered. Should be pretty exciting, and we're going to be concluding the format of Regulation C, which we've been using for the past couple of months, into a Regulation D brand new format for the World Championship. So this is going to be the final conclusion of Regulation C, and let's go over what the meta has been for the past couple of months. We started off with the European International Championship, where Palafin balance was basically everywhere at the European International Championship, consisting of Fluttermane, Arcanine, Palafin, and then Amoonguss, as well as either Tinglu, sometimes Excalibur, sometimes Roaring Moon. Definitely was a team that was very hot during that time period. However, has fallen off very significantly ever since. We've seen a few pop up here and there over the past couple of regionals, but it really hasn't been the same, and Palafin usage has steadily been on the decline. Now a new balance is taking king, especially over the past couple of events that a lot of top players have utilized, featuring Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Gyarados, and Tinglu. These six have been very common. You have been able to see a lot of different sets with like Terras on the Iron Hands, different items as well, Swords Dance, Assault Vest, with a lot of top players being able to utilize it and perform well at these events, such as WolfeyGlick at the Hartford Regional Championship got top 4, Paul Chua got top 4 at the Milwaukee Regional Championship with the 6, and Brian Hume took home the Regional Championship in Milwaukee featuring these 6 as well, and they're all different sets. Another thing to utilize as well has been the factor of Dondozo. Pretty common, even though a lot of Regulation C wasn't too sure about Dondozo usage, mainly because the ruined Pokemon made it hard for Dondozo to really last on the field due to their effective abilities in Chi-Pao and Chi-Yu. Just offensive wise, you could really dish out a lot of damage, so Dondozo is really hard to stick around on the field, but still has been persistent. Other than like a small drop in between a few regionals, it was able to still do pretty well up to date, and still has a pretty strong record of mostly about 2 Dondozos usually able to make the top cut of each regional championship. So overall, still a very strong factor that has to be prepared for. Mouse Ape has been on the radar, especially recently with Zachary Thornburg being able to win the Puerto Rico special event with it recently, as well as getting top 4 at the Fresno Regional Championship, and Nick Navarre has also been using that same team as well. Oriflame, after David Kutesh's strong European International Championship performance, winning Hong Kong Nationals as well with a Rotom Wash adjustment, and it has recently won the Turn special event, makes it a pretty strong contender, and is actually something you do have to prepare for. Weather is still very common, however there have been a few changes. Sun has been on the decline recently ever since Joseph Ugarte's regional championship win in Portland with the Jumpluff Torkoal stuff. Really has fallen on the decline. We have seen it here and there, but overall hasn't performed nearly as strong over recently. We've also seen a decline in Murkrow Sun as well. We've seen Rain still be pretty strong overall, especially from Gavin Michaels, who got second place at the Fresno Regional Championship. We saw Ryan Hay get second place at the Hartford Regional Championship, and Colin Heyer has been able to get day 2 at a few regional championships featuring this Rain team, featuring Pelipper and Azumarill, and the Trick Room Fluttermane as well. Talonflame has been doing well once again. It has kind of not been used at the beginning of Regulation C, but started picking up recently, especially with James Evans being one of the main piloters, featuring Chien-Pao Garchomp, especially the hyper offensive team, and Chuppacross has been utilizing one featuring Dragonite, Chien-Pao, and Talonflame recently that got top 8 at the Fresno Regional Championship. So all of the team cores that we've really seen have been very viable. A few ladder trends that I've noticed so far after playing quite a bit for Regulation C is that Rotom Wash has actually picked up safety goggles, especially after it won the Hong Kong National Championship. It has proven to be really strong, especially into the new balance stuff. We've seen a lot of safety goggles Rotom Wash with Willis be able to do really well, and it's mainly because you can burn the Iron Hands, you can ignore the Amoonguss, so Rage Powder isn't a factor. Thunderbolt for the Gyarados, it is able to Hydro Pump if it's like Terra Fire on the Iron Hands. It's pretty annoying to deal with as well for Chien-Pao and Dragonite, mainly because you could Terra Ghost, Extreme Speed, be immune to it, and then you can just go for a Will-O-Wisp and burn the Dragonite Chien-Pao, which is a pretty big factor. Another thing that has increased in usage recently has been the Roaring Moon. Roaring Moon has been rising up recently, mainly because it is still, again, strong against the new balance stuff that players are using with the Chi-Yu stuff. So overall, it is definitely a strong factor. It has pretty good special defense. It's weak on the physical side, but has been paired with Arcanine that can burn, for instance, the Iron Hands, and featuring some very strong offense with the attack booster, being really bulky, being able to take hits from like Flutter Mane, Chi-Yu, and then firing back with a really strong physical acrobatics with the attack booster as well. And then finally, the last thing we've noticed as Kingambit has been very, very strong recently, especially throughout the entire season. We saw Luca Triagut get top 4 at the Fort Wayne Regional Championship with a Swords Dance Kingambit, and it's still been very strong recently as well. We saw Kingambit do pretty well at the Hartford Regional Championship, taking first place with an Assault Vest set, won Portland as well with an Assault Vest set with Terra Fire, and then we've seen the Swords Dance set again win the Fresno Regional Championship piloted by Emilio Forbes, and got second place at the Puerto Rico special event alongside getting a top 8 placement there. Kingambit is definitely a strong Pokemon that you do have to prepare for at the North American International Championship, but this meta has been really going in a really interesting direction. So many things are viable, and players are really just going to be focusing on what teams that they've been able to do well with the season and make the small adjustments to prepare for this event.
North America has had incredibly fierce competition all season long, and as such has developed some of the best players in the world currently. Players from the United States have already taken home 2 international titles this season, with Gavin Michaels winning OCIC and Paul Chua winning EUIC. But alongside them, we have a slate of regional champions that will also be competing at NAIC for the title. But being a top player can be defined as having consistency, finding multiple top 8s and top 16s throughout the season, such as some of the players that James mentioned previously, like Zachary Thornburg, Nick Navarre, and James Evans, the reigning NAIC champion. These players have mastered a specific archetype over the course of the season, and that familiarity and comfort leads to such in-depth knowledge about every matchup that you can see in the meta. Going to our neighbors in Latin America next, Latin America has always had such a strong and passionate VGC community, and most recently they've been known for using a lot of Earthworm, Tinglu Balance, and Annihilate. A lot of their events were backloaded towards the end of the season, which means they've been playing a lot of Regulation C. So the players that have been doing well at those events are definitely players to look out for. We have Javier Valdez, the Santiago Regional Champion, Paul Ruiz, the 2018 World Champion from Ecuador, and Gabriel Agati, this year's EUIC runner-up. Gabriel is a strong favorite to win the international title, given he's the only player to ever top cut all 4 international championship locations. And he's come in second so many times that he's very due for a win. Halfway around the globe, we have Australia. They haven't had too many events this year, but there are a few players that will be competing at NAIC that always show up big on the international stage. There's Alfredo Chen Gonzalez, who got top 8 at OCIC earlier this year, Sam Pandelis, who has had similar accomplishments this year, and Megan Rattle, who got top 8 at the World Championships last year. And finally, we have several players from Europe that are strong contenders ahead of this NAIC. All of the regional champion and special event winners will be in attendance, hoping to take away the title on NA soil. We've got Marcus Stoddard, Maddie Morgan, Nico Davide Coneda, and Eric Rios. But there are also several players that you can't count out of the running. Marco Silva from Italy is the 2020 OCIC champion and also got second at Malmö earlier this year. And then there's Aurelien Sula, a player from France who recently aged up from the seniors division that started off this season so strong, with a top 16 at OCIC, a top 4 at Bochum, and second place at Utrecht. The future is super bright for him. Across the board, North America makes a very strong case for itself to bring home the 3rd and final international title ahead of the World Championships. But honestly, anything can happen, especially when there is a lot on the line and everyone is bringing their A game.
This internationals will likely be the largest internationals in VGC history and potentially the largest in-person tournament in VGC history. It stands out to me for a couple of different reasons. First of all, it's the last opportunity for players to earn championship points to qualify for Worlds. At this point, about 80 North American players have qualified for Worlds, and there are about another 50 that are 100 points or less away from qualifying. If you get top 128 in a tournament, then you get 100 points, allowing those 50 plus players to qualify. If there are over 800 players in the Masters division that show up, then points actually extend down to top 256, meaning that you don't have to go 6-3 to potentially qualify. You could actually be a higher end 5-4 and get points. And so that'll be a really big deal, because if we're under 800 players, then a fair amount of players with 6 wins and 3 losses after the first day will get 0 points. That's one thing I'm paying attention to. Do we actually break the 800 person threshold. In addition, one thing that makes this tournament really interesting is that it is the final event of Regulation C. Historically, a lot of players would bring more conservative teams to North American Internationals because they wanted to keep their really big techs and secrets for the World Championships. However, Worlds is going to be a completely different format this year with Regulation D. I do expect some players to really try to break the meta and bring something completely off the wall for this tournament. Now, I expect the majority of players to still bring compositions that they've had a lot of familiarity with, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some very well-known players bring some very crazy teams because it's the last opportunity to do so. And I think for this tournament, you have to ask yourself, what are your goals? For players that are trying to secure day 2 of Worlds, for example, the players that are in the top 12 in North American Championship points right now, if you're on the higher end, maybe you just bring something that can guarantee you a top 128 finish, secure those final 100 points to guarantee your spot. If you're on the cusp of qualifying and you're from like the 6th to 12th range, for example, then maybe you consider bringing a team that gives you a higher probability of, say, winning the entire event. And for those players that are 100 points or less away from qualifying for Worlds, I think a lot of them will likely stick to what is comfortable with them, because if your whole season is on the line and you know that you likely will need to get 6 wins or more at Internats to qualify for Worlds, would you rather go with something that you've already had a lot of experience with, maybe played a couple of regionals with, or go with something completely new? I know for me, historically, back when it was US Nationals and not Internats, I would often just make modified versions of the teams that I brought to regionals and perfect them for Nationals or what is now Internats. I think that'll be an interesting thing to follow. If you look at the top 8 in North American Championship points, a lot of players have stuck to the same concept throughout the entire season or throughout the last couple of months. That's one of the main trends I've noted from a lot of the top 8 players, right? Just sticking to what you're comfortable with. That's what I expect for a lot of players at this tournament. But like I said, because it is the final event of the season, I do expect this to potentially bring out more creativity than we normally see at the international championships. To me, there are a couple of comps that I think have been very established in the meta at this point, and I expect to see this across the board. I think hyper offense is something that has done very well recently as well. TSL Tang win the regional championship with Champao Dragonite, and that team had like King Gambit, Fluttermane, Bundle, and Arcanine, for example. We have seen Chuppa Cross, who finished top 8 at Fresno Regionals with the Talonflame hyper offense team. James Evans is one of the most notable hyper offense teams using Talonflame, Garchomp, Golden Go, and Iron Hands. Champao, for example, throughout so much of the season. Orthworm, of course, has had a lot of tremendous success in the last month leading up into North American Internationals as well. We've seen different variants of it. For example, a new variant with Gothitelle popped up recently, but the fundamental core strategy still exists, and so that's one Pokemon to pay attention to. And finally, there are a couple of individual Pokemon that I have my eyes out on. King Gambit won the Fresno Regional Championships. Emilio Forbes piloted it to a first place finish, and he used a Swords Dance variant, and with Black Glasses and Dark Terra just does so much damage across the board, especially after a Swords Dance. I've noticed that Pokemon like Grimmsnarl, Corviknight, Gothitelle, and then this is not an individual Pokemon, but it's a combo, Indeedee and Armarouge, all of those have popped up a little bit more recently from what I've noticed as well. So those are some specific ones to pay attention to. Ultimately, it's hard to say which one of these will end up on top, because I think the format is at a point where things are pretty balanced and a lot of these teams have good matchups against some and then bad matchups against others. So I think a lot of this will actually come down to execution and player experience, and I'm eager to see, for example, the top 8 to 12 North American players, are they going to just bring teams that they have a lot of comfort with, or are they going to try to just go completely off the script and bring something super off meta? It's really hard to say. I think if I had to predict, most players going to North American Internationals that are trying to contend for Worlds or qualify for Worlds will likely bring things that are a little bit more comfortable to them. But of course, North American Internationals is a huge tournament, and having played in it before, the first couple of rounds, you will run into some really crazy teams and strategies and things that maybe aren't super meta. But that's part of the beauty of this tournament, right? It's a huge tournament, and not everyone has the goal of qualifying for Worlds. Some people just really want to have a good time with the teams that they've spent the last couple of months perfecting. In terms of players to look out for, I definitely have my eye on all of the top 16 North American players in terms of championship points events coming into this tournament. Within that field, there are multiple ex-international champions such as Gavin Michaels, as well as Paul Chua, who won the 2 internationals this season, James Evans, who won North American Internationals last year, WolfeyGlick, who won NAIC back in 2019, and Ashton Cox, who is a 2-time international champion. I think any of those players I could definitely see taking the entire tournament. I'm also really eager to see how other players who've had such tremendous seasons, and everyone in the top 16 has, right? So Justin Tang, for example, 2-time regional champion in his first season, really excited to see how he does as well. But I really think anyone in that top 16 group is good enough to potentially win the whole tournament. I also am paying attention to the players who have received travel awards to fly from other regions to come here. So that's Europe, Oceania, and Latin America. I think Europe in particular is bringing some super strong players. Eric Rios and Marco Fierro are both ex-international champions as well. Latin America, of course, has Gabriel Gatti, who finished second at EUIC and second at NAIC last year, and is the first player to top cut all 4 internationals in the world, which is an incredible accomplishment. I think for those players that receive travel awards to come, there's probably less pressure because you're not playing for a day 2 invitation. At this point, those players likely know that they've secured it, and so you're playing more so for pride and for, of course, the chance to become an international champion. Whereas I think for players that are playing for a Worlds invite or playing to get that day 2 spot, there's a little bit more stress on the line, and your mind might not be focused on winning the whole tournament, but rather securing just a good enough finish so that you can get those final points that you need. That's going to be it for our North American International Championship preview. Don't forget to tune in this Friday through Sunday on Twitch and YouTube. Rosemary will be commentating the event, and James Beck and Wolf will both be competing in the tournament. I unfortunately will not be in attendance, but I'm really excited to watch from home. If you are competing in the tournament, best of luck. Don't forget to have fun. At the end of the day, it may be a stressful tournament, but it may also just end up being the largest tournament of all time, and I think that's a really cool thing to be a part of. And if you're watching from home, don't forget to let us know down in the comment section below what you're rooting for, what Pokemon you'd like to see come up on top, and maybe any predictions you have, especially for unique Pokemon or strategies that you think have the chance of winning it all. Thanks so much as always for joining us here at Beastcoast Pokemon. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, give us any feedback, subscribe to the channel. We just reached 20,000 subscribers and we have so many bigger plans for all of you. So yeah, thanks for joining us and see you soon.